Bills Mafia. Tonight on the Air Raid Hour, we are breaking down the Buffalo Bills roster after the first wave of free agency. Which positions are locked in? Where do the Bills still need help? And what are the biggest priorities heading into the NFL draft? We've got all that and more coming your way, but first.
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
Welcome in Bills Mafia to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at The Bills Guys, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. And Dave, tonight we finally get to sort of set our sights on the NFL draft. Now we're giving ourselves a week buffer to catch up on a little bit of research because we had to deal with free agency the last couple of weeks. So our goal today is going to be to reset this Buffalo Bills roster. Where does it stand? Where do we need help? And then from there, we will start breaking down prospects. And next week, we're going to have cornerbacks coming at you. So for those of you following us on social media, today you saw me posting some clips and things of that nature as I started to dive real deep into this cornerback class. And I like what I see, but we'll get into that next week. But first thoughts, Dave. What do you got for us this evening?
Well, I will say this, right, it's been kind of a bit of a roller coaster, right, when it comes to the Bills free agency, at least to this point. It's been a kind of a slow start. They got Josh Palmer sort of late on that first day, Michael Hoecht later on that first day, and we did the show Monday. And then it was kind of interesting. It was like quiet for a bit. And then all of a sudden you get the Joey Bosa news, and then you get Larry Ogunjobi news, and then you get Dane Jackson coming. It was kind of an up and down thing. And then you throw in the suspension news in on top of all of that, and you've kind of left yourself in a situation, if you're like a fan kind of looking at this and thinking, where do the Bills go now from here when it comes to either the next wave of free agency or even the draft, and how much do these suspensions factor in? So for me, I would say it was, it was, I don't want to call it middling because I feel like that comes with a negative connotation. I think it was good, not great. I think that there were some moves that I probably would have not made, although I do like the Joey Bosa move particularly. Mm-hmm. Bruce Nolan, who is a friend of our show, love Bruce, has put out a really good question on Twitter on Sunday, and it was like, what move do you like the most so far, and what move do you like the least? And I said I like the Joey Bosa move the most so far because of the upside that you get with him. But the Dane Jackson move, I'm kind of like, there were better options in my mind out there, and I felt like the Bills went with familiarity. As to say, for me, it kind of is like, I'm okay with it, I guess, generally. That's the best way I can say it.
Yeah, for me right now, I don't know what it is. And, again, pointing back to our old friend Bruce Nolan, right? What's his saying, right? Expectations minus reality equals disappointment. I think I set myself up for it. Like, I thought the Bills were going to take some big swings this offseason, and that just never sort of came about. Now, maybe the Buffalo Bills attempted to make some big swings and it just didn't happen, and they went to plan B, plan C, etc. But I'm not saying the Buffalo Bills had a bad offseason. They retained a lot of dudes. They brought in Joey Bosa, who I think, if they can maximize him, can be a real difference maker. I think Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoecht, when they can play, will be effective. I think Josh Palmer is a really good complement to the room. Like, I think they did some really good things, and they set themselves up to once again give themselves a chance in January. But at the end of the day, and maybe this is just the inner fan in me speaking, I don't even want to say disappointed. I just kind of want to say emotionless right now because I'm not vibing with the offseason, but I'm not mad at it either.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you said it more succinctly than I did. That's how I feel. And like Pete put
Mhm.
in the comments, like the suspensions were a wet blanket, and I'm like, I get that. And part of me is almost like it's like kind of the reverse of what I was hoping would happen, right? And in my mind, I'm like, okay, we've got Ogunjobi, we've got Hoyt, get these guys off and running in the early part of the
Mhm.
season and kind of maybe save Joey Bosa a little bit for not necessarily like save him for the playoffs like a LeBron type of situation, load management, but like really like use like save him right as much as you can, because in the same way that we wanted Von Miller to be ready to roll for the playoffs because of his history and what he did with the Denver Broncos and the LA Rams, having Joey Bosa as a guy that you don't need to count on for 70-80% of the snaps would have been ideal.
Mhm.
But now in the beginning of the season, you're almost having to count on him for maybe more snaps than you would have hoped. Now there's still more moves to be made. There's the draft, obviously, and so that still could end up being a rotation, but like he may end up playing more snaps now than you may have wanted him to early in the season.
Taking a look, just the Bills' moves in totality so far. They've extended Allen, Shakir, Rousseau, Bernard. They've re-signed Ty Johnson, Reggie Gilliam, Damar Hamlin, Reed Ferguson. They signed Darrington Evans, Josh Palmer, Laviska Shenault, uh, Kendrick Green, Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi, Dane Jackson, Derek Forrest. They traded Kyrie Elam for pick swaps with Dallas. They got more than I thought they would. So
Yep.
kudos to Brandon Beane for that. But I think the big news is, and I think Pete was the one in the comments section who put it up, the suspensions are kind of a wet blanket, right? Like that was the big news that dropped when Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi were introduced to the media, was the fact that they are going to serve 6-game suspensions. And I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this
Mhm.
because there are a lot of people, and they are correct, right? Like I'm not saying these people are wrong. There are a lot of people who are quick to point out that these 6-game suspensions, they look bad, but ultimately they do not matter because we just need all of these guys to be healthy and ready for the playoffs. Again, not here to disagree with that, but I'm also mindful that every year we're sitting here in February or late January, and we're always thinking to ourselves in this era of Buffalo Bills football, what if, right? For
Mhm.
years, it was, what if we got the Chiefs at home? Then it was, well, what if we had them with a single healthy linebacker? And then this past year, it was once again, well, what if the Chiefs didn't make a deal with the devil and somehow win 15 regular season games? And that game was at home again now that we have healthy linebackers, right? Like year after year after year, it's the what ifs. And I don't want to be sitting here next February and thinking to ourselves, well, what if we had signed 2 defensive linemen who could play the first 6 games and we didn't get off to a 3-3 start and we had the 1 seed, right? Like, so again, me questioning this will probably put into the universe that they'll do the reverse to make me look stupid. So maybe that I'm helping us here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I like that.
I just feel like, yes, it's easy to downplay it now, but we could easily be sitting here next February saying, what if?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some good comments in the comment section, right? Does it matter towards getting the number 1 seed? Yeah, in theory, it could make a difference between
Mhm.
winning a game or 2 in that first 6 game. I mean, that's a third of the season we're talking about. We also don't know the schedule yet, so we don't even know who the Bills might even be playing in those first 6 games. Could they be playing a key opponent to where those tiebreakers may matter at the end of the season? Now, you'd like to think that a guy like Ogunjobi or a guy like Hoyt might not be the difference between you winning and losing a game, but it could have a snowball effect, right?
Mhm.
In the sense that, like, maybe you do have to play Joey Bosa more than you wanted to. Maybe you end up drafting a guy that you otherwise wouldn't have. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but like these things start to creep into your mind. And if you're really trying to go for that number 1 seed and make sure that you have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, then yeah, it could matter. Um, are we getting a little ahead of ourselves with that? Of course, sure we are. And yes, like of course the number 1 priority is to just win the division and make the playoffs, guarantee yourself that home playoff game. But the NFL is different every year. everyone thought the Bills were going to take a step back last year. They didn't. They took us, arguably exceeded expectations. So you just never know in the NFL what could happen. And now it also kind of puts a little bit more of a wrinkle onto what you're going to do in the draft. Now, the good news is obviously is that as these guys are suspended, in theory, they're not going to get injured during the suspension, right? Because they're not even going to be at the facility. So in theory, you're going to get 2 healthy guys back sort of close to the midway point. And secondly, they won't count against your roster at the time that you need to make these roster decisions come training camp and so on. So, those roster decisions will be made after week 6 when you want to bring these guys back. So it's not like you have to eat these guys on the roster and lose those 2 guys for those first 6 games. You're going to have spots to fill with players, but it does, as Pete said, put a little bit of a wet blanket on the whole situation.
A couple of free agents that are going under the radar that I want to talk about. Let's start with Darrington Evans and Laviska Shenault, because Sean McDermott is on the competition committee, and they are going to be changing the rules this year, hopefully to get there to be more kickoffs. So when you look at the signing of Darrington Evans, noted kick returner, Laviska Shenault, noted kick returner, we have Brandon Codrington on the roster, mostly as a punt returner, but maybe he'll get some looks at kick returner as well. It really looks like the Buffalo Bills were mindful of adding some guys to the roster with some kick return props in hopes that maybe they can give this team a little bit of a jolt. Now, for Evans, I think if he makes the team, it would be as a 4th running back. Shenault, if he makes the team, I think it would be as a 6th wide receiver. And we'll talk about that when we get to breaking down our position groups. And obviously, Brandon Codrington would just be sort of a utility player taking up one of those DB spots. But it could be an interesting battle this training camp between these 3 guys and more, possibly, for kick return duties, as this could have more of a role in the NFL this season.
Yeah, it could. And this was a conversation we had going into last year as well. And then the Bills swung the trade for Codrington right before the season started. And that was that. We all thought that maybe Daquan Hardy would be the guy to have the inside track of return duties. Ty Johnson obviously had his name in the mix as well. Ray Davis got a little run on return duties. And at some point, there was even a thought of maybe a guy like James Cook could even do return duties. Now, obviously, that wasn't going to be the preferred option. But look, it gives the Bills options. It gives the Bills competition come the summer. It gives them some very low risk. And I don't want to sit here and say these are high upside, right? Because this is like Darrington Evans' 3rd stint or whatever on the team, or maybe even 4th. But Shenault was a guy we liked in the pre-draft process. I mean, this is years and years ago, so he's not the same player now, but like there's some utility there for him.
He had a kick return touchdown for Seattle this year that was nutso. So,
and
he still got a little bit of pop.
And he's got some pop. And so again, low risk, but prudent moves. They're not necessarily like low risk, high ceiling, but there's some ceiling there. Yep. There is some ceiling. And it just gives you a chance to kind of let the cream rise to the crop at that particular battle in camp, because we still don't know what Daquan Hardy can do as a returner.
Oh, that's right.
Codrington, right? Punts only, really. So it's like there is some opportunity here.
That's the conversation at training camp, right? Because you don't want to have 2 roster spots for return specialists. So ideally, in a perfect world, you would like your return specialist to do both. Laviska Shenault does not return punts. Darrington Evans, to my knowledge, does not return punts. Hardy might do both, or at least be given a chance to do both. Codrington will be given a chance to do both. He did a little bit of kick returning for the Bills this year, but for the most part, it was Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. So I think in looking at it, that's going to be a conversation we're going to be having in August when it comes down time to like cutting down the roster, is sort of like who fits where. Can they do more to justify their roster spot? Because you saw at the end of last season, the Bills were literally making Brandon Codrington inactive and making Khalil Shakir return punts, which is not something I think you want to do on a regular basis if you are the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
The other guy,
I would say,
I
was just saying, and I would say too with Evans, right? Like a year ago, weren't sure what Ty Johnson's role was going to evolve to. Obviously, he ended up having a bigger role than we imagined. The Bills bring him back. It also gives the Bills a little bit of buffer when it comes to reps, preseason games, and things of that nature, to have guys like Evans and Frank Gore Jr. eat up some of those reps as well, which we've seen the Bills do with Evans in the past in the preseason.
The last guy to talk about really here is Derek Forrest. I think that was a really good signing from the Buffalo Bills. It kind of reminded a lot of people on social media of years and years and years ago, Sean McDermott, first year bringing on, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Now, Micah Hyde had a little bit more like name recognition. The Bills paid both of those guys more and had definitely more of an intent with those two guys because that was a much different iteration. That was a rebuilding. You had to overpay guys to come here back then. They were sort of just trying to build a culture. They were trying to build a foundation. They were doing all those things back then that are much different now. But when you look at Forrest, he is a guy who delivered 2 years ago in a Ron Rivera defense. Sean McDermott, a Ron Rivera, Joe Johnson disciple. Those are the two major sort of influences, I think, in his career as a defensive coordinator. He is a guy who could legitimately, I think the Bills really want Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp to be the guys who win that job clearly, but I think he could challenge for it. And if someone gets hurt, he could usurp them and just never give up the spot if he plays well. I think that's a signing that could really, really pay off for the Buffalo Bills, but I also felt the same way about Mike Edwards, so who knows?
I think I like the potential for Forrest more than I did for Mike Edwards at this stage, at least, and kind of looking back at it. I thought Mike Edwards definitely felt like he could have been, quote, penciled in as a starter. Obviously, that was before the Bills went out and drafted Cole Bishop. Now, here's what I'll say about the safety position, right? An interesting conversation about the safety position because a lot of people still think it was a draft need, right? Even with guys like Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp presumably coming in to start. But the Bills did use three different safeties a lot last year because Taylor Rapp and the friendly fire and Cole Bishop injured during training camp and Damar Hamlin injured at different points during the year. The Bills really used Hamlin, Rapp, and Bishop last year quite a bit, right? So I don't think it's a bad idea for the Bills to now have three usable guys at that position. And I think Forrest will bring a little more juice and upside than a guy like Mike Edwards did a year ago. And like you said, he could legitimately push these guys and it still doesn't necessarily stop the Bills from drafting a safety. Might have pushed it down the priority list though now.
All right. Again, the meat of tonight's show is going to be sort of reconstructing this roster. Where do we stand after the first wave of free agency? We are going to break that down next, but first, a quick word from our sponsor.
What's up, y'all? Khalil Shakir here. When I want Buffalo pizza, it's got to be Picasso's.
Khalil Shakir. Your team, our pizza. Picasso's. This is Buffalo Pizza.
This episode is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza with 4 convenient locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Picasso's Pizza has been serving Buffalo's best pizza since 1980. Whether you are local or across the country, you can enjoy their delicious pizza delivered fresh to your door. Visit picassospizza.net to place your order today. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, let's get into sort of the heart of our show this evening. We're going to start with the Buffalo Bills offense. Then we're going to work our way to the defense, go position group by position group, and we're just going to have a conversation. And that conversation is mostly going to revolve around where do the Buffalo Bills still need to add to this roster? Specifically, what should we be focusing on when it comes to our draft prep and our draft shows that we will be doing over the next couple of weeks here? So taking a look at the Buffalo Bills roster, we're going to start with quarterback, and the Buffalo Bills have 4 quarterbacks on the roster right now, starting with Josh Allen. Obviously, he is the entrenched starter, franchise quarterback, QB1, but then the Buffalo Bills also have Mitch Trubisky, Mike White, and Shane Buechele on the roster. That is a lot of veteran quarterback presence, even though Shane Buechele has not played in a lot of games. I don't think he's played in any regular season game. He's played in a ton of preseason games. He's been in a ton of training camps. So this is a position where the Buffalo Bills are unlikely to add unless they were to move off of a guy like a Mitch Trubisky or a Shane Buechele. But I really don't think, Dave, that is going to happen. I think those are the 4 guys we're going to see heading into training camp.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of cynically joking in the Discord chat with everyone, like, why is Mitch Trubisky still on this team? Like, don't we want the $2.5 million cap? But now with these suspensions and you get some of that cap relief, again, I don't think that's going to factor in now because it doesn't seem like the Bills are really going to be now in the market to make a big move. I don't know that there's even a big move to make at this point unless it's a trade. So the cap space less of a concern now with keeping a guy like Mitch Trubisky. Probably just let him play out this last year of his 2-year deal that he re-signed back for. But I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of a competition between Mike White and Mitch Trubisky for that backup job this year. But I agree with you. Probably no more additions, and I think this room is set, or maybe even goes down by one if they do eventually want to get rid of Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, if they want to get rid of Mitch, the answer is clearly, I think, going to be Mike White, and then you have Shane Buechele sitting there for you on the practice squad. Moving now to the running back position, the Bills have 4 guys there, plus the fullback Reggie Gilliam. It's James Cook, it's Ray Davis, it's Ty Johnson, it's Darrington Evans, it's Frank Gore Jr., and then the aforementioned Reggie Gilliam as well. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, really not a lot of open spots here at running back. I do not think a James Cook trade is likely, and I don't think the Bills are about to throw a wrench into what was a very, very successful offense last year. I think the game plan with James Cook is going to be to run him into the ground and collect your comp pick in 2027. I think that appears to be the road the Buffalo Bills are going down. The issue there is he could hold out, but I think they have enough to get by for a few weeks if he holds out as he sort of gets back and gets rusty, because he's not sitting out games. He's not going to do it. He won't. He doesn't make enough money to do that. He doesn't want to hurt his chances at his next contract. He might sit out training camp, but he will not sit out regular season games. He will be rusty when he comes back. We got enough to survive a couple of weeks, but the current makeup of this room is fine as is with Cook issues looming. It does not prevent them, though, I think, from taking a day 3 flyer, and then Darrington Evans could be expendable, or Frank Gore Jr. could be expendable. It's an extremely loaded class, but the Bills do not have to invest here through the draft if they don't need to, if the board doesn't fall a certain way, etc.
Yeah, if the board doesn't fall a certain way, and if they end up not keeping all of those picks, right? Because they have though that tons of ammo on day 3 as it is, which would seem like a perfect spot to take one of these higher upside running backs in a very deep class. And I'm not against that, right? If they end up keeping most of these picks and they do end up picking 9 or 10 of their picks, I'm fine with them taking a running back in the draft and replacing a Darrington Evans on the roster with an upside running back that maybe has some returnability and that could potentially make a run at a roster spot in 2026 if James Cook is no longer here. But I do agree with you at this point. It doesn't make sense for James Cook to not show up for games, considering he got that raise last year from hitting those escalators. The salary bumped up to $5+ million. I don't think he's going to jeopardize that. And also, I think he's going to want to make sure that he parlays whatever this season is into his next big contract. So I agree with you. I'm still kind of like, as it stands right now with all the picks, I'd love to see them take a running back on day 3. There's a ton of good players we love, and kind of replace that Derek spot. But nothing at the top of the depth chart right now is to be kind of worried about.
Because that's where my head's at, right? Like, if the Buffalo Bills go and drop one of their second round picks on a running back, like, come on, what are we doing here? We have other needs that we need to fill. If you're drafting a guy in round 2, you better be trading James Cook and getting like a 3rd round pick, right? To sort of churn the roster, because that running back's just not going to play. Like, it's just not going to happen. So would be upset if they did that, especially considering it's an extremely loaded class. But then you have to take that into account. If you're sitting there in the 4th round, could there be a guy that's just too good to pass up on in the 4th round? You get to the 5th round. Is there a guy that's just too good to pass up in the 5th round or even the 6th round based on just how loaded this class is? Again, some people have said it's like 2 running back classes in one. So you can expect some uber talented players to be there in the 5th and 6th round that you can go, throw a dart at. But if you're the Buffalo Bills and the players, especially along the defensive line, if Michael Hoecht and Larry Ogunjobi aren't going to play right away, the first 6 games, you might need some rookies along that defensive line that can start right away. So you might need to use your 5th and your 6th round picks as ammunition to move up in the draft.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you use that as ammunition to move up in the draft, all of a sudden, like, oh, we got 10 picks, just throw a dart. Those darts aren't there anymore. We use them to move up to draft some more instant impact defensive lineman or a corner. So then you ask yourself, like, who's left after the draft is over, like in undrafted free agency? And how do those players compare to Frank Gore? With how loaded this class is, I think they probably compare pretty well with Frank Gore. So the Bills have a legitimate chance to add a running back to this room. I don't think it'll be a high investment. And if they do, I think it'll come at the expense of either Frank Gore Jr. or Darrington Evans.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
All right, on to the wide receiver position here and taking a look at it. Listen, like, whether fans like it or not, I think our top four are pretty much set, especially considering the draft allocation and the monetary allocation to the position. You have Khalil Shakir, Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman, and Curtis Samuel. After that, you have Tyrell Shavers, KJ Hamler, Jalen Virgil, Laviska Shenault. So there are some interesting guys sort of at the bottom half of the depth chart competing for the Mac Hollins spot or competing to convince the Bills to keep a sixth receiver this year. If I look at this room, to me, you need some upside here. If you're going to add in the draft, I'm looking for one particular trait and one particular skill set, and that is some game-breaking speed. And there's really not a ton of that in this draft. But like, you look at the Jack Bests of the world or the Xavier Restrepos of the world, and you can love them as much as you want. I just don't know why the Buffalo Bills would draft them given what they already have in their receiving room. Like, how do they fit onto the football field? To me, you're looking still for field stretching. Defensive coordinators have to plan for it, speed. That is the one trait I think that is still missing from this room, because Shavers and Virgil, I think, are going to be fighting for the Mac Hollins role, being a special teamer and a depth guy. Maybe you draft a guy to compete with them. And Shenault is going to be competing, I think, for maybe a wide receiver 6 job and kick returning duties. I don't think he's going to be gunning on special teams. So if he's going to be active on game day, given the other 4 receivers we have, he's going to have to be a return man and a 6 wide receiver. So the Bills can certainly add here, and I think they will. For me, it's got to be speed. That's the trait I think the Bills are missing here.
It definitely is. And I mean, we've already talked about the injuries, the suspensions on the defensive line. And if they keep these picks and they need to, use ammo to move up, then you probably are looking at, based on asset allocation and the current makeup of your room, is it smart to add a wide receiver on day 1 or day 2? I don't know that that's the best use of your resources right now, given what you still have to fill on the defensive line. And then I agree with you on the speed element, right? You start to think about, like, what does that mean for you when you kind of look at the draft, and you guys like Keandre Lambert-Smith, who ran a 4.37 40, who's not going to go until day 3, or a Ty Felton maybe who goes day 3, right? Or an Arian Smith, right? Like those are guys. There are speed guys that can be had on day 3 that aren't the complete polished wide receiver. Kyle Williams, a complete polished wide receiver that you have to spend the huge capital on. It's really tough to kind of compare this wide receiver class to last year with how good last year's was. This isn't a bad wide receiver class, but it's certainly not as good as last year. But some of the traits that you'd be looking for if you're the Bills, and that speed, and that's presumably what they need to look to add. And we've heard Brandon Beane talk about that in the press conferences. It can be had on day 3 in this draft. So again, with all that ammo on day 3, it's going to come down to, do the Bills keep most of these picks? Do they trade up? And if they do, like, do you still have 6 or 7 picks? I'm okay with one of those picks being used on a speed wide receiver.
Looking at the tight end spot, you have Dalton Kincaid coming back for his 3rd season. The Buffalo Bills are hoping healthy Dalton Kincaid will be a much better Dalton Kincaid. You have Dawson Knox. You have Zach Davidson. They have Amani Rodgers, but the reports are that he tore his ACL working out. So why the Buffalo Bills haven't released him with an injury settlement or placed him on IR or whatever, like, I don't know. But I read that he tore his ACL. So he's not really a part of the Buffalo Bills depth chart anymore. And then you have the lingering question of Quentin Morris as well. he's legitimately, if you go to BuffaloBills.com and look at their roster right now, Quentin Morris's name is there. So I don't know, like, if they just forgot to delete him, or maybe the Buffalo Bills are going to bring him back and they just haven't announced it yet. Like, who knows? But if Quentin Morris is back, this is a room that is pretty well set at tight end. I cannot see the Buffalo Bills making really any legitimate additions. However, if Quentin Morris is not back, I could see the Buffalo Bills, if they have a dart later on in the draft. People have said this is a pretty deep tight end class. Maybe the Buffalo Bills take a flyer on a guy in the 5th or the 6th round to add a cheap contract, a guy who's cost controlled, who can go in and compete with Quentin Morris, or they can throw onto the practice squad if Zach Davidson leaves for other opportunities, filling essentially that spot from Amani Rodgers, who by all accounts tore his ACL. So I don't know why he's still sort of on that depth chart. But what are your thoughts on the tight end position?
Yeah, I mean, look, Quentin Morris is not on the team, right? As of now. So it's like you have three usable guys, because Rodgers tore his ACL, and it's pretty thin, right? Beyond those three, like there's no one else. So you probably do want to add a guy at some point to this room. Now, I could certainly see it being like a UDFA type, because I think they feel pretty good about the top three, and Davidson even got some playing time last year, and he's become kind of a fan favorite, and he's looked pretty good. So I'm not trying to discount what he brings to the team, but you have three usable guys. You've invested a first-round pick in Dalton Kincaid. You've got the big contract with Dawson Knox, and you've got a usable guy in Davidson. I don't think monetarily you're spending a lot more on this position, and you are not spending a high draft pick. I kind of lean towards late. If you keep all 10 picks, fine, or a UDFA type. If you end up only keeping 6 or 7 of these picks, I'm probably not using one on a tight end.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, it's mostly just to get somebody in who's cost controlled, because whether Quentin Morris is back or not, or no matter how comfortable the Buffalo Bills feel with Zach Davidson, you add a body to that room who's got a 4-year contract at a very minimal price, and they go out there and they are within the margin of error of those two guys, or they beat out those two guys, all of a sudden you don't have to worry about the ERFA tags or the RFA tags, or bringing the guy back for a low amount of money. Like, you are literally adding a very cheap contract to that room. So I think the Buffalo Bills will, in some way, shape, or form, attempt to add another tight end, whether it's bringing Quentin Morris back, or it is, drafting a guy late, or signing a UDFA. All right, on to the offensive line. And honestly, this is crazy. Like, legitimately, this offensive line is kind of set. They've got returning all 5 guys along the starting offensive line: Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, David Edwards. They've got their swing tackle last year, Tillen Grable, coming back. Their other swing tackle last year, Ryan Vandemark, coming back. You have Alec Anderson, who was our 6th offensive lineman last year. Maybe possibly could be David Edwards' like heir apparent. He's back. You have Cedric Van Pran Granger, who they drafted last year, back. You've added Kendrick Green in free agency, who I think is a cool little reclamation project. You have Richard Garage, who has been on our practice squad for a couple of years. I think the Buffalo Bills really like him. You have Mike Edwards, the guard that they had in training camp last year, and they had in the practice squad last year. And you have Travis Clayton. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, like, honestly, I would be shocked. I would be shocked if they added a guy in the draft knowing he's going to get Nick brokered, right? Like, the chances of you drafting a guy and getting him onto your practice squad knowing your guys seemingly get poached every year, like, take another position that's more likely to make your football team. Wait until UDFA is before you go starting addressing this offensive line. If you're the Buffalo Bills, I really don't see a lot of addition here. Bullish Bill, LaBill says, I thought Alec retired. That was Tommy Doyle. So Tommy Doyle is no longer a member of the Buffalo Bills, but I can't, Pete Nana, no notes. Like, yeah, we are spoiled. I can't imagine the Buffalo Bills using any amount of draft capital on a offensive lineman.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Although seemingly every year they kind of like pick an offensive lineman out of nowhere that we're just like, oh, it was like Luke Tenuta a couple years ago. And it was like Travis Clayton last year. And we're just like, oh, okay. So But I do think they're at the point now where it's like you have enough need elsewhere.
Mhm.
This is probably one, and we'll talk about linebacker here, obviously in a minute. But like
Mhm.
this is probably the one position group on the team you really don't need to spend any draft capital on. Now I understand the thought process of like always wanting to find young offensive line talent, so that's
Yeah,
fine. Like
100%.
if you throw a late dart if you want, bring in a UDFA or two, like cool. That I'm cool with that. But it doesn't need your full on attention right now.
Yeah, I mean, some people will point to like David Edwards' contract and say like he isn't safe. We can cut him and save $4 million. I think that ship sailed 2 weeks ago. If the
That ship
Buffalo Bills
sailed. If you
were
need the
looking
money,
to
you're
save
cutting
money,
Mitch Trubisky, right? I
yeah,
mean, come on.
I think that ship sailed. And then Kendrick Green, we both liked him coming out of the draft. I think it's a really fun, reclamation type of project, but I hope he's the next Will Clapp. Like, I hope he's just a guy who sits on the practice squad, because if Kendrick Green makes the Buffalo Bills next year, it's for one of two reasons. It's either somebody got hurt or Cedric Van Pran Granger did not pan out. So I'm rooting for Cedric Van Pran Granger. I'm rooting for guys to stay healthy. This guy, Kendrick Green, who we both think is a fun little reclamation project, he makes the roster, something bad happened. Like,
Yeah.
that's how deep they are right now.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't, expect that to happen. So if you see people
Well,
out there talking
we'll
about that, I wouldn't
and
expect that. But
and
yes,
we will
something
have
bad
to
will
get
happen.
we will have to get someone much better at this than us on the case here. Maybe our guy Uber Hansen, get him on this. Has there ever been a team in NFL history that brought back the same offense? Not starters. 1 through 8, 1 through 9. Has there ever been a team that brought back the same offensive line from 1 year to the next year? Like that would be crazy. Nabil comes in and says maybe Ryan Vandermark is upgradable. Maybe they know Osiris Torrance is going to walk, but even then, right? Like, you just can't roster that many guys. You're keeping Alec Anderson. You're probably keeping Cedric Van Pran Granger. So
Mhm.
if you want to draft a guy because you're afraid that Osiris Torrance is going to walk in 2 years, where are you putting him? On the
I
practice
mean,
squad? Like,
worry about that
yeah,
later, right? You still have
yeah,
2 more years.
that's something you got to worry about later, I think, if you're the Buffalo Bills. So that just about does it for the offense. Let's
Mhm.
transition now to the Buffalo Bills defense. And this is where stuff gets super interesting. At edge rusher, the Buffalo Bills, they've got Gregory Rousseau, Joey Bosa, Michael Hoecht, AJ Epinesa, and Javon Solomon. But obviously, Michael Hoecht is facing he does have a 6-game suspension. So that throws a pretty big wrench into this Buffalo Bills defensive line, which is now pretty much the same exact edge rushing unit from last year, just with Joey Bosa replacing Von Miller. So where do you stand with the Buffalo Bills defensive line right now in terms of what we're looking to add?
I still think you can use a premium draft pick on an edge player here. And the reason I say this is for a number of reasons. Number one, you've got the 6-game suspension. I know that's a short-term outlook, but it's a premium position in the NFL. Joey Bosa is only on a 1-year contract. Health has always been a concern with him throughout his career. And thirdly, you are trying to put together a edge group for the future to go alongside Gregory Rousseau, and AJ Epinesa is an unrestricted free agent after 2025. He only signed a 2-year contract. So,
Bosa's a
like,
free agent into this year.
yeah, Bosa is a free agent, 1-year deal. AJ Epinesa is a free agent after
Mhm.
this year. He signed a 2-year deal. And then, of course, Michael Hoecht is the 6-game suspension. Now you have him on term, but still, you need to add to this room still. Obviously, we hope that Javon Solomon takes a step up this year and right now slotted in to be the 5th guy and probably going to get some playing time early in the season as the 4th guy, depending on what the Bills do in the draft. But I still think a premium pick can be used. And when I say premium pick, I mean a day 1 or day 2 pick. You have the 2 second rounders, you have the 1st rounder. I would like to see a day 1 or day 2 pick still used at this
Mhm.
position. And I'm not saying it has to be the 1st round, but I
Yeah.
do want to see it happen on day 1 or day 2 to kind of solidify a bit the future of this room beyond 2025, and also give you a guy that if you pick a player that high, hopefully can make an impact early in the season with Hoyt injured,
Mhm.
spell Joey Bosa to give him some load management, and then obviously take pressure off Javon Solomon as well. ensure you a bit against what happens with AJ Epinesa. So I do like the idea of taking an edge early in this draft.
And Ryan Tongi comes in. He says, so goodbye to Javon Solomon if we draft a defensive end with a high draft capital. I don't think that, for a number of reasons. Number one, you have that 6-week buffer now with the Michael Hoecht suspension. And number two, I think AJ Epinesa, with 1 year left on his deal, can be expendable. So to me, AJ Epinesa, again, the 6-game suspension makes it a little bit more difficult because you're probably going to want his knowledge of the system. You're probably going to want his veteran experience, all those things. You're probably going to want that more now that Michael Hoecht is suspended than you did before, especially because you don't want Joey Bosa getting overworked. But to me, when push comes to shove, like, we have this very high regard for Javon Solomon because we loved him in the pre-draft process. He's a bendy edge rusher. He played really well in a limited amount of snaps. You want to see that extrapolate. But if Javon Solomon comes in and performs, he's going to stay because he's on term, right? But also there's a chance that he comes in and doesn't perform. And if he doesn't perform, then yeah, he's probably the odd man out, but he's got a real legitimate shot to earn some snaps here. But you are spot on. I think the Buffalo Bills need to add a day 1 or a day 2 pick along the defensive line, specifically at edge rusher. And we'll talk about IDL in a moment. At worst, a guy who slips maybe into the 4th round. The Bills are really counting on Joey Bosa's health. I think they're really counting on Javon Solomon's development. They have Michael Hoecht now obviously out for 6 games. It would be really disappointing to me if we get through the draft, the Bills don't take one, and then they sign like a Shaq Lawson, or they sign a guy similar to Casey Toohill. If they go that route, I'll be pretty disappointed in what the Buffalo Bills are going to be rolling out week 1, just hoping that Joey Bosa can stay healthy and probably overworking him because Michael Hoecht is suspended. I think the real question, you have Joey Bosa now, you have Michael Hoecht. These are some real power players. And we talk a lot about like the Jordan Birches and the Landon Jacksons and the Michael Williams. Like, we've had a ton of conversations about these Nick Skirton, right? These big power edges. Are they maybe looking for another guy to complement Javon Solomon? Could we be maybe targeting now more of a bendy finesse guy as opposed to a power player? Or are we looking to throw another power player into this group?
I mean, to be honest, my preference was always to have a bendier guy, even before these signings. And I know like the cutting of Von Miller and all that kind of plays into this whole equation. But like, regardless of whether you sign Hoecht or Bosa, you still had Epinesa and Rousseau as kind of your top 2, in theory, top 2 guys. And then Von Miller kind of as your third. Now you do have another power guy in Joey Bosa. You have a power guy in Hoecht. Hoyt's on for term. And you have Rousseau now extended. So, like, I would like to see more of a pure pass rusher. Donovan E., as Charles puts in the comment section, to me, is a guy that I would be interested in sort of to fill that type of role. I would prefer a guy like that, a Donovan E. Type of player in the mold of that. Maybe like I'm trying to just think of who else maybe comes to mind. But yeah, that's the kind of the guy early in the draft at 3rd. But I don't know, adding a 4th power guy to the rotate. I want a guy who can get home to the quarterback. And like, yes, Joey Bosa is a unicorn when he's healthy because like he is the mix of power and getting home to the quarterback. But I want a guy who has a track record and can get to the quarterback in bunches, and Donovan E. has that track record to me in this draft. So he would be the guy that I would be. Yeah,
Pos Mafia comes in and says, "Is Smoot for sure going elsewhere?" That would be probably the version of that I'm talking about, like a Shaq Lawson. Like, all right, we didn't get an edge rusher, we went elsewhere. We're just going to bring Dwayne Smoot back for 6 weeks, and then when Michael Hoecht comes back. But that to me, it would be disappointing. I'm looking more for like what Joe DeRosa comes in and says Princely, and Beane comes in and says Princely Umilian. Like, that would be the type of dude that would be like a nice investment. A Braden Swinson, right, out of LSU would be a nice little swing, I think, on day 2, like something like that. Even Zen Clover comes in and says Ashton Dollett. I love David Walker. Like, we can go on and on and on. One of the days that we're going to spend on this podcast is going through probably 25 different edge rushers the Buffalo Bills could possibly pursue in the draft, because this is a position that they need to address. before we get to training camp. Speaking of a position we need to address again before we get into training camp, let's talk about the interior of the Buffalo Bills defensive line. They've got Ed Oliver. They've got Larry Ogunjobi, who obviously is serving that 6-game suspension. They are bringing back, for now, Daquan Jones. Dwayne Carter enters year 2. You've got Zion Logue, you've got Branson Dean. This is a position the Buffalo Bills will need to address early in the draft. And Dave, I'm pretty confident they will. We've said it before and they haven't, but I'm still pretty confident.
I surely hope so. It's a lining up for them, right? You have 2 round 2 picks. You have the first rounder. You have a glaring
loaded class,
a great class where there's going to be very good players available on day 2. Now, you don't want to force, right? You don't want to force need into a pick, but like I would find it's going to be really surprising to me if it doesn't line up to where there's a really good defensive tackle or 2 available at some point for the Bills on day 1 or day 2. It would be just unreal if that doesn't happen. And like, they need to invest here.
And here's the thing. Every Bills fan, I think, in their mind has a vision of what they want. And that vision is like, obviously the goal, the vision is Kenneth Grant. I think that's what most people in Bills Mafia want. I think another guy that has a lot of fans is Derek Harmon. That makes more sense, probably for the Buffalo Bills at pick 30. And Derek Harmon is also a fit. So I guess that's kind of a bad sort of comp to use here. But we here in Bills Mafia, we really value the one tech position as a fan base. We really have been looking for this like big beefy plugger to come in and play next to Ed Oliver at the level Daquan Jones was before his injury. That's just what every Bills fan wants, right? But it's sort of becoming clear to me that the Buffalo Bills do not value the traditional one tech the way that the fans do, because even when they have one, right, Starla Tule, Harrison Phillips, Daquan Jones, like even when they have one, they don't have a second one. So when that guy gets hurt or when that guy struggles, there's no one else to fall back on. We had to bring in Linval Joseph 2 seasons ago. They like quick, explosive guys who can penetrate, can get upfield. It's tough to find those guys that are above 315 pounds, because when you get that and they're above 315 pounds, they're usually taken in the top half of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost at the point, Dave, like one of my favorite players in this class is Alfred Collins, but I'm almost at the point where I feel like if you don't have 33 plus inch arms and you don't have a good explosion score, you're not even on the Bills draft board. Like Alfred Collins has 35-inch arms. He's an absolute run stuffer. He'd be the perfect plugger, I think, next to Ed Oliver, part of a defensive line rotation. Like on obvious passing downs, you can take him off the field. But I think with what you're getting, he's totally worth a second-round investment. I don't even know if the Bills are considering Alfred Collins, because he's got 14th percentile vert, 6th percentile broad, and not a lot of college pass rush production. Like, I don't even know if the Buffalo Bills are considering what to me seems like such an obvious fix in Alfred Collins.
It would certainly be, I know Bills fans love him and they would be very happy to get him, but he would certainly be out of the normal archetype that the Bills have gone for at the defensive tackle position, right? 332 pounds. They've never had a defensive tackle. I think Star was in the 320s. Daquan,
because even Daquan lost weight. Like Daquan was listed at 315, but I'm pretty sure he said he played at 305. Like he slimmed down.
Yeah. So I mean, like you're talking about. I mean, I hate to say this, but you're talking about guys like T.J. Sanders. You're talking about
Darius
guys
Alexander.
like Darius Alexander. You're talking about guys like Joshua Farmer. Like these are the types of guys you are.
There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with it, but like I just feel like there's this whole part of the draft class that is just like almost completely ignored. Like, you can like both. You don't need to take one option off the table. And for them to go out and just zero in on Larry Ogunjobi in free agency and be like, well, Daquan Jones is our one tech. Maybe we'll just play him a little less next year. No, you got to have something if Daquan Jones doesn't work out as your one tech. And it just can't be like, well, Dwayne Carter will play out of position, or, oh, Larry Ogunjobi will play out of position. Like we saw that we saw Tim Settle come in here and fail. We saw Poona Ford come in here and fail. Like we've seen guys come in here and fail because they expect them to do things they don't do. Just go get the freaking plugger. Like, you should have signed the Roy Lopez's of the world, or you should have pursued this or pursued that. They don't. They want 1 tech and then 5 3 techs. Like that's just the world they live in. And I just don't understand it.
Yeah. And I feel like we keep asking for this. I mean, we talk about the defensive line every year, obviously, but I feel like this goes back to years and years. Like we wanted Tonga. Like it was like Tonga. It was, who was the other guy from Texas, the big dude, like a couple years ago that everybody wanted? I can't even remember his name now, but he was like 330 pounds. Like everyone wanted him. He was in every Bills fan mock draft. And I'm like, we're not going to pick that guy. Like the Bills just don't pick guys like that. This year, it feels like it's Alfred Collins or Deion Walker. Like the Bills just don't pick guys like that. Now, would I be absolutely thrilled if they got a guy like Alfred Collins with their second round pick, or even with their first second round pick? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm just, T'Vondre Sweat. Thanks, Joe. In the comments, that's who I was thinking of. T'Vondre Sweat, like everyone they were never going to pick that guy. They never were going to pick that guy. And just like, I don't think they're not going to pick a guy like Alfred Collins, even though I want him to, or a guy like Tyleik Williams even, right? I don't think they would even go for a guy like that, even though I think he would be a perfect fit.
I'm really going to start diving into some of those guys, because I don't even have the percentiles for Tyleik up, but like, if your explosion, like if you're broad, your vert, like your explosion scores aren't in like at least in like the 60th, 70th percentile, I don't know if you're on the Bills board. Like I really don't. And like I said, Alfred Collins, 14th and 16th percentiles in vert and broad, just not something I think maybe the Buffalo Bills are gonna vibe with. But let's move on now to the linebacker position, and this is one where the Buffalo Bills are, I don't want to say loaded, right? We got Terrell Bernard, the communicator of our defense, just did a film room with Eric and Anth. It premiered 2 hours ago. If you haven't seen it yet, wait till this show's over and then go check it out. You got Matt Milano coming back. Hopefully he's healthy. You got Dorian Williams, who flashed last year as the first guy off the bench should something happen to Matt Milano. You got year 2 of Edifano Lafoscio, year 2 of Joe Andreessen, and you have Baylon Spector, who the Bills like, even though he cannot stay healthy. So the Buffalo Bills are like pretty set at the linebacker position. But I'm going to say this like 5 more times before the draft. If for some reason, and all the reports now indicate it's not going to happen, but if for some reason it did, if Jahad Campbell is sitting on the board at 30, he's probably the best player on the board at 30. And he's one of my favorite players. He might be my favorite player in this draft class. And I would not be mad a bit if the Buffalo Bills did it. But that's just like the one exception, I think. After that, if the Bills want to add a guy on day 3 to come in and compete, cool. I love Nick Martin from Oklahoma State. I love Teddy Buchanan from Cal. I love Sean Dolak from the University of Buffalo. Anyone who follows me on social media knows I love me some Sean Dolak. But I think as Bills fans, the expectation now is probably like the Nicholas Moros of the world, the UDFAs of the world, maybe a late round draft pick. I don't know if the Bills are going to look to bring in anything relevant at linebacker.
You need a playmaker on defense. I get kind of where you're coming from on that, but I also feel like this position group is kind of akin to the offensive line on the other side of the ball, to where like, yeah, it would be awesome to have like a stud that you'd take early, but it just doesn't make sense based on what the Bills need.
You can't even get Dorian Williams on the field.
Yeah. So it's like, yes, I know the future set with Terrell Bernard there. Technically, Matt Milano is still under contract for 2 more years, this year and next year. So we'll see what happens with that. And then you have Dorian Williams and Ulo, who you drafted last year. And you mentioned like Morrow and guys like that the Bills seem to always have. Spector still on the team. So yes, I kind of understand where you're coming from, because just the quality of the player. But that might be one of those where you just can't do it unless you think he's going to be a true playmaker. So I don't know. Maybe I think I wouldn't be. I'm not going to go as far as to say I'll be mad, but it would also have to depend on what else is available on the board at that point.
I'll do a backflip live on air if we get Josh.
If he slips into the second and you want to then maybe try to make a move to come up for him,
The newest
After-
report I saw this week was like he's going to go top 15 because I think teams
Okay.
aren't dumb. Like he's good.
Well, then we
He's
don't
so
have to worry
good.
about it. Then we don't have to worry about it.
I almost hope he gets drafted before us, just so you don't have to
Yeah,
worry about it.
He probably will.
Because then he goes to the Eagles, and I want to blow my brains out. Like that kind of stuff would happen. But Nabil N comes in and says Jack Kaiser, a bill in round 4. He's another guy, right? Like, it doesn't hurt to have 2 farmers on the team, right? Josh Allen, a pistachio farmer, Jack Kaiser. I don't know if you guys watched that Peacock series behind the scenes with Marcus Freeman and the Irish. Jack Kaiser's a farmer too, so we'd have 2 farm. We might maybe the only team in the NFL with 2 farmers on the roster. So, Joe, please don't hold me to that backflip. I can't do it, but in my mind, I'll do it. On now to the cornerback position. Let's talk about corners, and I guess we have to. Christian Benford, Buffalo Bills could not get a long-term deal done with him, and his price just gets higher and higher by the day. You saw a mega deal come in today. Dave, why am I blanking on who got that mega deal? 30 million AAV. Who was that?
Stingley?
Stingley got that deal today. So the price just keeps going up and up and up for Trent McDuffie's going to get done before Christian Benford at this rate, and the price will continue to go up. But they've got Christian Benford, Jamarcus Ingram, Dane Jackson, Daquan Hardy, and Brandon Codrington. Those are the boundary type of guys, even though Hardy is inside outside. Codrington is mostly just a kick returner and a DB in name only. And then in the slot, they have Taron Johnson, they have Cam Lewis, and they have Takori Couch. So the Buffalo Bills have bodies. Whether you want those bodies outside of Christian Benford starting, that is a whole other story. So Trey Amos, you are a Buffalo Bill?
Big Trey Amos fan. He was like he was the first guy scouted in this draft cycle, and he's still pretty much near the tops of my list at cornerback fits for the Bills. Love me some Trey Amos. I will say this, right? Like, I was not like a huge fan of the Dane Jackson re-signing. I get the familiarity, and maybe it's there as a placeholder. He was not good last year. Like, he was better when he was with the Bills, but this feels a lot like sort of the Josh Norman reunion to me from a couple years ago, where, and I agree with Pete here, Jahdae Barron is legit, and I would be pretty happy with a guy like Jahdae Barron at 30 if he was available. I think where I'm coming down to in all this is that these first 3 picks for the Bills, the first rounder and the 2 second rounders, in my mind, I'm thinking corner, defensive tackle, and edge in whatever particular order you want to put it in. But I do think that likely maybe the best value for you is to take a corner at pick 30, depending on how things go. And it is a shame right now that they don't have Christian Benford under contract. I'm certainly in maybe the minority in this opinion that the fact that they did get Christian Benford in the 6th round, the same draft as Kaiir Elam, does not absolve the Bills from making a terrible pick with Kaiir Elam, and best of luck to him in Dallas. I hope he does well, but like, man, you need to, for the crowd that kind of claims like it's okay because we got Christian Benford in the 6th in that same draft, like, you better hope they lock up Christian Benford here pretty soon.
Because we're pretty without a paddle at the other spot here right now. So it's tough to me, right? Because much like, we're still licking our wounds from Boogie Basham years and years and years ago, we're still licking our wounds over Kaiir Elam. And there's going to be a lot of Bills fans in their feelings if we like take Trey Amos at don't get me wrong, I think Trey Amos is worthy of the 30th overall pick. He squarely has a late 1st round grade on my board. I think he's a top 40 player in this draft. But like, if Malachi Starks falls and is sitting on the board and we draft Trey Amos because of need, and then Malachi Starks goes to like the Chiefs or the Eagles, right? Or like if there is James Pierce drops and we take Trey Amos because we felt like we had the need at corner and he goes to the Chiefs or the Eagles, like, that's when, as a Bills fan, you get upset because you feel like the Bills drafted a guy not necessarily because they're the best player on the board, but because they were a good player on the board who fit a need, and you backed yourself into that corner. At this rate, if you're the Buffalo Bills, outside of signing Asante Samuel Jr. or Stephon Gilmore right now, you have to take a guy at 30, or you have to trade up in the 2nd round to get a guy. Like, you have to, maybe he falls to you in the 2nd round, but Brandon Beane don't play that game. Brandon Beane's not a patient man. Like, so if you're the Bills, he is going to jump the gun at 30 because he feels like he needs to fill that spot, or he's going to aggressively trade up in the second round to take a guy probably in the top 40 to 50 picks. I think one of our first 2 picks will be a corner, and it'll either be at pick 30 or a trade up in the second round. So again, like, I'm confident that it could work, right? I'm confident that it could work, but also I don't like the fact that we backed ourselves into this corner again.
We are really backed into a corner, and now it comes down to where do the Bills really value? Is it the defensive line or is it corner? And
the interesting thing here is, though, if you have a Jahdae Barron who slips down the board, if you have a Will Johnson who slips down the board, right? Like, Jahdae Barron's got the short arms. Is he an overhang defender? Is he a safety? Is he a corner? Like, what is he? If he's a corner, he's a zone corner who can play man. Will Johnson had sort of the Derek Stingley, went back to Michigan because he had to, just like Derek Stingley went back to LSU because he had to, and kind of had an off year maybe because they didn't care so much. Will Johnson was dealing with the injury. Now people are questioning Will Johnson's long speed. So is he just a zone corner? If he is, he's an elite zone corner. But still, like, if you can't mano a guy on a consistent basis, you're probably not going in the top 15. So, like, could we see some sliding from these 2 guys after Travis Hunter? And if we do see some sliding, could the Buffalo Bills get in on that action? Who knows, right? So I think that's one of the things that we're going to talk about next week is maybe we shouldn't write off a Jahdae Barron. Maybe we shouldn't write off a Will Johnson, because maybe that's Brandon Beane's splash this offseason, is trading up for one of these, in my opinion, pretty darn elite zone corners. They're not man-to-man corners. They can do it. But these are some pretty elite zone corners in Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron. So if Brandon Beane, if that's a splash this year, cool. Wasn't the splash I was expecting, but that I think could be considered the splash. If they can get up into the top 20 picks and get one of those 2 guys.
Yeah, the other thing that Pete and I are talking about in the comment section is you could trade your 2 seconds, right, and probably get back up close to pick 30, right around where you're picking now. And now, listen, like, you in theory miss out then on one of the positions of need early, right? So it's like if you're thinking CB, edge, IDL, now you only have the 2 picks, but in theory you could get 2 absolute studs at 2 of the 3 of those positions. That might be worth it.
Close your eyes and picture this: the Buffalo Bills take Derek Harmon at pick 30, trade up to like 35, take Trey Amos.
I know, and
we walk out of the top 40 picks with Derek Harmon and Trey Amos.
Yep.
That'd be nice. Like, I'd be willing to sacrifice the edge rusher because maybe a guy drops to the 4th round, or you can use all those late round picks to trade back up into the 3rd and get your edge rusher. But now you're like losing out on the wide receiver, or you're losing out in the double dip. Like, that's another thing we didn't talk about: double dip, right? Double dipping at corner. I think the Bills need to draft 2.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I mean, I could see a day 1 or day 2, and then again, if they keep some of these picks, the multiple 4ths, right? That's not a bad spot to then go and get another guy that you like, it, down there, like a Jacob Parrish, who a lot of people like, could be available potentially on early day 3. Like, I wouldn't mind that at all.
Mm-hmm. All right, on to the safety position. The Buffalo Bills have Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop returning. Those are the 2 guys who are likely to start. They also re-signed Damar Hamlin, so you have that comfortable depth that you're confident in there. And then you've added the wild card of Derek Forrest, who played really well under Ron Rivera. Still, if you want to count Cam Lewis as a safety, you got 5. In reality, you got 4. The Buffalo Bills are going to add more safeties. Whether they make the decision to draft a guy or get some UDFAs or sign another veteran, that's TBD. But I think the Derek Forrest signing almost says to me the Bills have kind of relegated themselves to the fact that, yeah, they can't waste one of those first 3 picks. I shouldn't say waste. They can't utilize one of those 3 picks on a safety. Like, if Xavier Watts is there, they can't do it because they need an edge. Like, if, Mbuka is there, like, they can't do it because they need an edge or a receiver or whatever. I think the Forrest signing was sort of the Bills resigning themselves to the fact that, like, if they do take a safety, it's maybe someone who drops to the 4th round where they have a little bit more freedom, or a guy they can trade up into the 3rd round for.
Yeah, I think my dream of Andrew Makuba in early day 3 is probably gone now with the Hamlin and the Forrest signings. I mean, I mean, maybe maybe Hamlin gets cut. I don't know, right? But it just seems like they've at least positioned themselves where they don't need to take a safety. Although I wouldn't be upset if they did, because I still think for the long term it's not a bad idea, because there's still a little bit of uncertainty of what the top of this room might look like. I think we're penciling in Rapp and Bishop, but you don't know if these guys are going to pan out, right? You hope they do. Maybe Forrest pans out. We'll see. We know what Hamlin is. He's adequate. He's fine as a fourth guy. I wouldn't expect him to be the starter this year, but Billy Bowman, Makuba, those are guys I really like. And
Ransom. Yeah. Just there's some good safeties in this draft. It's just, I think they're all going to be gone by the fourth round, but maybe there's one guy sitting there still in the fourth round. Maybe you can trade up a little bit.
It's weird though. It's like one of those where like sometimes like teams just don't pick them. Like last year we saw teams did pick them right before the Bills. Like Javon Bullard went 2 picks before the Bills took Cole Bishop, which is the guy I loved.
Which is why the Bills probably took Cole Bishop. I think they were trying to. I think in Embedded they were trying to trade up for him, weren't they?
I don't know, but
and then he just ended up slipping.
He was my guy. He was on my no matter what last year, and 2 picks before.
DTD. The dream is dead, but he's a Cardinal. At least I get to watch him live. Nope, we're not gonna get to talk a lot about safety in this pre-draft process. We will, but we won't. Right. So I got a little bit of a hot take here, a little spicy take here. No bones about it. Says, what about Nicky Manwari? Nicky Manwari is my safety 3. I have him behind Malachi Starks and Xavier Watts. I think Manwari had a great combine. I think he's a good player. I don't think he has the instincts that a Starks does, and I don't think he has the ball hawking ability that Xavier Watts does. I think he's a very good day 2 player. If he goes before pick 30, I'll be ecstatic, because I think the Bills will have saved themselves from being tempted to draft a guy too high, in my opinion. Like the player. I'm not dissing the player. I just think round 1 for Manwari is too high. I think he's a day 2 guy. I think he has a place in this league and he will play in this league, but I'd put Watts and Starks in front of him.
I'll have an even hotter take than that. I'll take Makuba over him.
Ooh, there we go. Getting spicy. Spicy. RJ Mickens is a good one. No, Sheldon comes in. He's a guy, right? Maybe day 3, the Buffalo Bills take a chance.
Yeah, I like RJ Mickens.
Clemson right? Product. Yep. Yeah. All right. So that brings us, ladies and gents, to our final thoughts. All right, Dave, before we head out of here this evening, any final thoughts on what we talked about tonight? Anything else you want to talk about, etc.?
Yeah, I'll just say this, like around the suspensions, right? Like suspensions aside, I don't think that should affect the Bills' draft strategy to invest in young defensive linemen. I know Hoecht is only 27. Ogunjobi is only here for 1 year. Don't let that stop you from taking defensive line early in this draft. I don't see a scenario where the Bills don't take at least 1 and possibly 2 defensive linemen on between day 1 and day 2 if they keep the picks. I think the Bills fans will riot if the Bills don't take a defensive lineman on day 1 or day 2. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to now, kind of like now that the first wave of free agency is over, to kind of getting now back again into the draft prep. And we'll see. You got some good work to do for next week's show on cornerback.
In a perfect world to me, it would be defensive tackle first, trade up for a corner in early round 2, maintain your other second round pick somehow, right? Get an edge rusher there, trade back into the 3rd round for a receiver, and then whatever you want with the rest.
How about this scenario?
Double dipping a corner, taking a safety, taking a linebacker, taking a running back, whatever. Like, if we can somehow walk away with 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, and they are IDL corner, and I guess it doesn't have to go in this order, but IDL corner, edge, and wide receiver, I'd be pretty happy.
The other way to do that, right, is to, if you're at pick 30 and there's like 3 or 4 defensive tackles that you like because it's so deep, you can maybe try to trade back and add the 3rd rounder way.
You are just trying to just F with every Bills fan's emotions right now, aren't you?
Yes. If you want, I'm just saying, if you want to try to add a 3rd rounder, that's what you did last year with the Chiefs, right? You added the 3rd rounder by trading back.
Trading back one spot? Trade back one spot.
Hey, look, if there's three or four,
Matthew Golden on the board. Bills trade back one spot.
Oh man, yeah. I'm just saying there are many ways to acquire that third rounder without losing both of your second.
So next week, now that everyone has turned us off, that we put that into the world. Next week we are talking cornerbacks. I'm really excited about that. We're going to tier the corners. We're going to set our Buffalo Bills draft board at the cornerback position. So if you're looking to learn anything more about the cornerbacks in this draft class, there's 24 names on our show notes. Like, we can't get to them all, but we're getting to 24 of them. Like, so I weeded out the nickel corners. I weeded out some of the guys who are like pure man-to-man, like look awful in zone type of guys. Like, I've weeded some of those out, and I've gotten down to like 24 legit dudes I think the Bills could be considering. So somehow they'll manage to draft the 25th guy. But I got to whittle down to 24 guys. We're going to break down those 24 guys, where we expect to see them go in the draft, what we like about their game, what we don't like about their game, how they fit the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk about that next week. Then after that, we've obviously got interior defensive line. We'll get at that. Edge rusher, we'll get at that. Wide receiver, we will get at that. We will do our day 3 gem show where we'll mix in other positions. We'll do our day 2 show where we'll mix in other positions. We'll do our round 1 show where we'll mix in other positions as well. And obviously we got our no matter what episode coming up. So all of that to say, we've got you covered here at the Air Raid Hour if you're looking to know more about a lot of these prospects in the draft. And I know, Dave, you got started today in our Discord, setting the private chat to start preparing for our draft show.
Yeah, we'll have live coverage for you guys Thursday, Friday, Saturday during the draft. Most likely, Air Raid will be hosting Thursday night, round 1 of the draft. TBD on round 2. Usually Pro Ant hosts and we join on that. We got to work out the details, but we will have you covered. We don't have anyone actually going to the draft this year from Cover 1, as far as I know, which actually could mean we'll have more panelists than we did last year for live coverage, which would be great. We'll get guys like Joe DeRosa on. We'll get Chris Chouse.
Do we gotta get Joe?
Yeah, we do have to.
I'm just kidding. I'm messing with Joe because he's in the chat. I'm just messing with Joe because he's in the chat.
Oh yeah. I mean, Joe did a good job holding down day 3 last year. I got to give him credit. So look, we'll have you covered. We'll send out the schedule once we have it finalized as to what our panelists will look like for all 3 days. And yeah, it's coming up soon. We only got about a month to go. So
Joe's giving Kendall a run for his money as like one of my favorite people outside of you, of course. Right. I love Joe. Sorry, Joe. I was messing with you. But if you're looking to support this show, there are 3 ways in which you can go about supporting this show. Number 1, the easiest thing you can do, right? Tier 1 is you can hit that like button. Goes a long way to helping us with the algorithm. Second thing you can do is click that share button and share this on social media, share this with friends, share this with family, anyone you think would enjoy listen to us talk prospects here at the Air Raid Hour. And then the last thing you can do, if you really, really like us, is you can, after the show is over being live, we are on demand and it's done being live, leave a comment in the comment section, whether it's a positive note, a criticism, a go Bills, a cheers, another thought you had that maybe we didn't get to in the comment section. We try our best over the course of the week to get to all your comments and to respond to them. And even the people who tell me I'm boring and I need to show more enthusiasm. So hopefully I showed some more enthusiasm this week. I went with a tropical IPA to sort of like amp me up a little, to bring the energy a little bit this week for that person who left that comment.
We need to get sponsored by Red Bull, maybe, so we can have
I slug a sugar-free Red Bull every morning. I have a problem. So
let's
Red Bull, if you're listening,
DM them, get them on the horn.
Yeah, I'm pretty well accepted that sometime in my like mid 50s, my heart's gonna explode in my chest. Like I just come to accept that the fact that's gonna happen. Too much. It's sugar-free though, right? So it's fine.
Okay.
But thank you guys so much. Now that I ended that on that really morbid thought there. Hopefully it won't be live on air. Who knows if we'll still be doing this at 50, but leaving those comments really help with the algorithm as well. And we really appreciate that. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!